Within 40 minutes, Wexner's name was added back.
Within 40 minutes.
April 14th, 2023. 4:47 a.m., Industrial District, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The warehouse sits at the corner of South 27th Street and West Becker, a sprawling concrete structure with corrugated steel siding and loading docks facing the empty street. Federal agents from Homeland Security investigations position themselves at every exit. Tactical vests, battering rams. Night vision equipment ready but unnecessary. The warrant execution happens at dawn. The lead agent raises his fist, signals. The doors breach simultaneously. Inside, the scene defies the warrant description. This wasn't supposed to be a human trafficking investigation. The original target. Counterfeit electronics distribution, maybe some stolen merchandise networks. Standard mid-level organized crime. Instead, 43 people huddle in the northeast corner of the warehouse, ages ranging from 16 to 52. Origin countries spanning 7 nations across Central America and Southeast Asia. No beds, no sanitation facilities, a single industrial sink with a garden hose attached. Boxes of instant noodles stacked against the wall. The concrete floor covered with cardboard flattening and ratty blankets. The agents freeze. Call for backup. This changes everything. The investigation pivots. What began as Operation Circuit Break, a 14-month investigation into counterfeit consumer goods, transforms in those first minutes into the largest human trafficking prosecution in Wisconsin state history. The evidence discovered over the next 72 hours reveals a systematic criminal enterprise operating across 11 states, but generating an estimated $8.4 million annually through forced labor schemes masked as legitimate employment agencies. Special Agent Marcus Torres, leading the HSI Milwaukee field office, addresses reporters 3 days later outside the federal courthouse. His statement runs precisely 4 minutes. No questions allowed. The individuals we recovered from this location were not employees. They were commodities. They were bought, transported, housed in substandard conditions, and sold again to agricultural operations, construction contractors, and manufacturing facilities throughout the Midwest. The criminal organization responsible maintained meticulous records. We have recovered approximately 127,000 documents, including ledgers tracking individual workers by identification number, transportation manifests, your payment schedules to corrupt labor contractors, and correspondence detailing the systematic exploitation of vulnerable populations. The numbers tell a brutal story. The recovered ledgers now entered as evidence in United States versus Castellanos et al. Nestianer document 1,847 individuals processed through the Milwaukee warehouse between January 2019 and April 2023. Average placement fee charged to employers, $4,200 per worker. Average wage paid to workers, $2.15 per hour, deposited into accounts controlled by the trafficking network. Housing deducted at $600 weekly from workers who earned approximately $320 weekly before deductions. The mathematics creates permanent debt, inescapable servitude, the architecture of exploitation. At the center sits Ricardo Castellanos, 56 years old, resident of Whitefish Bay, an affluent Milwaukee suburb 14 miles from the warehouse. Public records show his primary business, Castellanos Staffing Solutions, operating since 2011 with licenses in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Michigan. Corporate filings list him as president and sole board member. Tax returns report annual revenues between $2.1 million and $3.8 million. The company maintains an office in downtown Milwaukee, 6th floor of a respectable commercial building, with a receptionist, conference rooms, and professional website advertising comprehensive workforce solutions for agricultural and industrial sectors. The facade operates flawlessly for 12 years. Behind the legitimate business structure, federal prosecutors allege siege warp-off bait reached record tougher covered work. Castellanos constructed a parallel operation. He maintained contacts with recruiters in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and the Philippines who identified workers desperate for American employment. The recruiters, working on commission, promised legal work visas, reasonable wages, safe housing, and legitimate employment contracts. The workers, many selling family land or borrowing from loan sharks to pay recruitment fees ranging from $8,000 to $15,000, arrived in the United States with falsified documentation. The documentation appears initially legitimate. H-2A agricultural worker visas properly filed with USCIS, but investigators discovered the applications contained fabricated employer information, non-existent farm operations, and addresses leading to vacant lots. The visas themselves, genuine government documents, were obtained through a network of corrupt immigration attorneys who submitted false applications by the hundreds. Upon arrival, workers discovered the promises dissolved immediately. Castellanos' associates confiscated passports. Workers received new instructions. They now owed additional transportation fees of $6,500, housing deposits of $2,400, and administrative costs of $1,800. The debt, presented as non-negotiable, could only be repaid through labor placement. The workers had no alternative, no documentation, no money, no understanding of American legal systems or rights. Many spoke no English. The network expands. The investigation, originally focused on Castellanos, rapidly expands as agents trace financial records and communications. Bank records reveal wire transfers to 14 associated individuals across 7 states. Cryptic messaging applications on seized phones show coordination between labor contractors. To warehouse supervisors, transportation coordinators, and corrupt officials, the indictment, unsealed on April 17, 2023, named 77 defendants across the criminal network. Ricardo Castellanos faces 18 federal counts, including conspiracy to commit forced labor, visa fraud, money laundering, and witness tampering. His wife, Elena Castellanos, 53, faces 8 counts related to financial management of the operation. Their son, Marco Castellanos, 28, managed day-to-day warehouse operations and faces 12 counts, including conspiracy and assault. 12 individuals operated as regional coordinators, managing worker placement across agricultural operations in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. These coordinators maintained relationships with farm operators and construction contractors, negotiating placement fees and managing worker transfers between sites. Several coordinators maintained legitimate businesses as covers: landscaping companies, temp agencies, agricultural equipment suppliers. 16 individuals worked as enforcers and warehouse supervisors. Their role: maintain control over workers through intimidation, threats, and occasional violence. Recovered text messages document threats against workers' families in home countries. Photographs show weapons confiscated during the warehouse raid: baseball bats, stun guns, pepper spray, and a single unregistered firearm. 23 individuals operated as labor contractors, the interface between the trafficking network and legitimate businesses. These contractors presented themselves as standard labor suppliers, providing workers to farms and construction sites while collecting payment. They maintained the fiction of legitimate employment while enforcing debt servitude arrangements. Several contractors operated for years without detection, their businesses appearing entirely legitimate to client companies. 8 corrupt immigration attorneys facilitated visa fraud on massive scale. Working from offices in Texas, California, and Florida, these attorneys submitted fraudulent H-2A applications using shell companies and non-existent employers. Fee structure: $800 per approved visa application. Estimated total: over 3,200 fraudulent visas filed between 2017 and 2023. 15 individuals provided support services: transportation drivers, document forgers, money transfer operators, and corrupt officials who accepted bribes for looking the other way. This tier includes 2 municipal building inspectors who approved warehouse occupancy despite obvious code violations, 1 state labor department employee who dismissed multiple complaints, and a border patrol officer who facilitated smooth entry for workers with questionable documentation. The mechanics of movement transportation logs seized from a storage unit in Kenosha detail the logistics. Workers arrived at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, approximately 90 miles south of Milwaukee. Shuttle vans, registered to shell companies, transported groups of 12 to 15 workers directly to turn south toward Mexico. Journey time: the tunnel extended 2,200 feet across the international boundary. To their debt account. It featured reinforced concrete walls. Inside the warehouse system, rail tracks, mother transport, and electrical lighting. New processing took between 4 and 6 hours. Represented an investment. Workers surrendered passports and documentation. Warehouse staff photographed each worker, signed identification numbers, and collected biometric data. During that time, fingerprints and iris scans later turned into a proprietary database. It facilitated the database recovered intact from Castellanos' laptop. Contains profiles for 2,847 individuals, including current location, employer, debt balance, and behavioral. Furniture Warehouse was owned by River Calculated Cruelty LLC, flight risk, company registered in Delaware with operational headquarters March 12, 2022. Registered transfer Thomas Brennan, a 53-year-old about conditions, no criminal record, and extensive family contact restricted real estate operations throughout Southern California. After processing, workers entered the placement queue. Average wait time: 4 to 11 days. During this period, workers lived in the warehouse under constant supervision. Meals: instant noodles, white rice, canned beans. Medical care: none unless emergency. Recreation: none. Communication with outside world: prohibited. When placement orders arrived, transportation coordinators moved workers during night hours to avoid detection. Delivery to farms and construction sites occurred through predetermined drop points, truck stops, rural intersections, industrial parking lots. The receiving labor contractor collected the workers, transported them to housing, and initiated their work assignments. Housing conditions varied, and the persons violated basic standards. Investigators discovered workers housed in trailer homes with 12 occupants and sharing 700 units. Farm outfits. Construction site trailers with intermittent water service and broken heating systems. The businesses that bought the investigation forced uncomfortable questions about corporate responsibility. 83 agricultural operations, construction companies, and manufacturing facilities received workers through Castellanos' network. Federal investigators examined each entity to determine knowledge and complicity. Prosecutors ultimately charged 16 business operators with conspiracy and forced labor violations. These individuals knowingly participated in the trafficking scheme, negotiating directly with network coordinators, agreeing to terms that clearly indicated exploitation, and ignoring obvious signs of coercion. Evidence against these defendants includes recorded phone conversations discussing cheap labor that won't complain, emails negotiating bulk worker purchases at reduced rates, and text messages acknowledging that workers lacked proper documentation. One farm operator discussing a planned OSHA inspection texted a Castellanos coordinator, "Need to move the special workers before Tuesday. Can't have them on property during inspection." 67 additional businesses received subpoenas and faced civil investigations. These entities claimed ignorance of the trafficking scheme, asserting they hired through legitimate labor contractors and assumed standard employment relationships existed. Federal investigators found varying levels of willful blindness. Some businesses asked no questions about impossibly low labor rates. Others ignored clear signs of coercion. Several failed to verify worker documentation or employment authorization. The legal standard requires proving knowledge or reasonable suspicion of trafficking. Many businesses escaped criminal prosecution while facing civil penalties, revocation of agricultural certifications, and permanent prohibition from federal contract eligibility. The coordinated takedown, $87 million. The arrests occur across 3 days in mid-April 2023. 214 federal agents coordinated state and local law enforcement across 11 states. The operation dismantled what federal officials described as the most sophisticated drug trafficking network operating along Castellanos' Whitefish Bay residence. But the investigation revealed something more disturbing: property, quantity of drugs. Additional arrests unfolded, exposed the corruption infrastructure that agents tracked down regional businesses, trusted officials, as a labor contract, ordinary neighbors, supporting network components of a criminal machine. Several operating with industrial efficiency. Hector Morales, a regional coordinator operating in Iowa, operation began Canadian border before arrest by border. His car contains $84,000 in Otay Mesa, showed false identification documents, and a ledger tracking 240 registered as a furniture distribution immigration power, anticipating arrest with destroyed business operations. Federal agents recovered partially burned documents from office incidents. They entered the warehouse on January 28, 2025, and shredded financial. The ground floor held furniture as abstracted by forensic sofas, tables, the defendants faced staggering exposure. Everything appeared forced labor conspiracy. The sub-basement told a different story. 20 years. Agents discovered a tunnel entrance concealed additional hydraulic flooring. Visa fraud. The passage descended 47. Money laundering, 20 years. Wire fraud, 20 years. Witness tampering, 20 years. Ricardo Castellanos faces a combined maximum sentence of 347 years if convicted on all counts. Justice and aftermath. The prosecution moves with unusual speed. By September 2023, 32 defendants accept plea agreements, cooperating fully with investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. Their testimony provides detailed accounts of network operations, financial structures, and recruitment methods. The trial for remaining defendants begins January 2024. Evidence presentation consumes 4 weeks. Prosecutors present the recovered ledgers, thousands of messages and emails, financial transaction records, and testimony from 47 victims. The victim impact statements devastate the courtroom. A 34-year-old woman from Guatemala describes selling her family's coffee farm to pay recruitment fees, only to discover the promised restaurant job didn't exist. Instead, 18 months picking vegetables in Wisconsin for wages she never received. A 41-year-old man from Honduras recounts threats against his children when he questioned housing deductions. A 23-year-old woman from the Philippines explains how debt grew faster than earnings could reduce it, creating permanent servitude. The jury deliberates 9 days. Verdicts return guilty on nearly all counts. Ricardo Castellanos receives 284 years in federal prison. Elena Castellanos, 87 years. Marco Castellanos, 156 years. The remaining defendants receive sentences ranging from 12 to 198 years. The recovered workers face uncertain futures. Many fear deportation despite victim status protections. Some return voluntarily to home countries, arriving with massive debt and no earnings. Others pursue T-visa applications allowing trafficking victims to remain in the United States. But the process consumes years and offers no guarantees. Several workers testified they'd been better off never leaving home. Despite the poverty they fled. Restitution ordered exceeds $14 million. Asset seizures recovered $2.8 million from Castellanos' accounts, real estate holdings, and luxury vehicles. The remainder remains uncollectible. Spent, hidden, or transferred to offshore accounts, investigators cannot access. The uncomfortable questions remain. The Milwaukee warehouse is demolished in August 2024. A developer purchases the property. Plans call for luxury condominiums, but the system that enabled Ricardo Castellanos continues operating. The visa fraud mechanisms remain discovery triggered in the agricultural and construction industries still demand cheap labor and maintain willful blindness about the sources. Recruitment networks, they trace wires, prey on desperate workers, promises of and corporate filers across multiple corrupt officials still accept company-owned or leased 47 properties. Somewhere else, at this moment, another warehouse operator and text, another ledger tracks identification numbers, 23 priority. Another group of workers huddles on agents document vehicle, wondering if the promises were all lies. The question isn't whether another Milwaukee exists. The question is, where and when will federal agents breach those doors?